Gross, willkommen in einem anderen Aufregens video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 4 of my battle series of videos. This video is covering the Battle of Nihriya. This video is mainly focused on looking at the battle from a figure gaming point of view, which includes the order of battle, troop types and the flow of the battle. If you wish a big picture of why the battle was fought, then this may not be the video for you. But if you want to know about the troop types, force mixes and what actually occurred on the battlefield, possibly, then continue to view on. When the Hittite king s5e05 conquered Mitanni, he created two provinces, Aleppo and Karamish, and distributed a large part of the conquered territories of this kingdom between his allies. The rest of what has been the empire, or had been the empire of the Mitanni, retained its independence as a Hittite vassal state called Hagin al-Bata. During the reign of the Hittite king Musili III, Hagin al-Bata was conquered by the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrians controlled the east bank of the Euphrates. When Hattushi III ousted his nephew Uri-Teshuba and seized the Hittite throne, he had to be content with a permanent loss of Hagin al-Bata to the Assyrians, despite its former status as a Hittite vassal state. The Assyrian involvement in Syria continued under the command of King Suleimanu Asred I, that's the Assyrian king, and this precipitated a crisis with Hatti, or the Hittites. The Hittites considered Assyrian involvement to be a clear attack on the frontiers of their empire and went into battle under their king Totaliya IV, Hattushi's son and successor. This led to a major battle, which is known today as the Battle of Nihriya. A letter giving details of the campaign and its outcome was sent by the king of Assyria, Suleimanu Asred, to Ugarit. Additional source material that we're using to ascertain what actually occurred in this battle comes from a Hittite document, which is coded KBO 414, and has been interpreted to show that the battle must have occurred around the 20th year of Suleimanu Asred's reign, that is, the Assyrian king's reign. We do know from the minimal sources that we have the battle occurred in the neighbourhood of Nihriya, which I have to assume is a town of some description, which no longer exists, and we're uncertain of its exact location. Let's now look at the armies in a little bit more detail. As you've probably ascertained, the source material that I'm working with is quite minimal, and a lot of interpretation has to occur, but anyway, when we drill down into the armies, we get into a little bit more tangible information. Suleimanu Asred I commanded the Assyrian army. He's the king of Assyria. The Assyrians in this period were definitely on the rise. There is only one reference which provides an idea of the sizes of the army. The Assyrians claim to have captured 28,000 Hittites at this battle. Most historians feel the actual number of troops would have been much lower, and as the Hittites mustered an army of about 25,000 men at Kadesh in 1274 BC, it's reasonable to assume this may have represented the full size of the Hittite army. As the Assyrians won, they may have fielded as many as 30,000 men and possibly 6,000 chariots included in that number. These values are very high for the period and do represent a maximum value. The actual troop numbers may well have been much less. Our minimal information provide no estimates for the number of chariots fielded by the Assyrian. A reasonable number is probably about 6,000 chariots. If the chariot numbers are correct, the foot probably numbered about 20,000 men in total as a maximum value. Let's drill down into the specific troop types using our favourite DBMM troop type classify method. Shashipa and Palace chariots were 2-horse, 2-crew chariots. A possible number, as we've indicated before, is about 6,000. I find this unusual as I've always visualised the Assyrians having much larger chariots. This data comes from the DBMM army list and upon some research is probably correct. The Assyrian 4-horse chariots were probably fielded much later than this particular battle. A very low number of troops may be mounted on horses or asses or donkeys. This troop type would have had not much impact during the battle, but was important in terms of scouting and messaging. The elite Assyrian foot were armed with a shield, axe and spear, well-trained, armed and experienced. This would have been the main infantry shock force of the Assyrian army. It's possibly up to 3,000 to 4,000 of this troop type was deployed at the battle. Supporting the elite foot were bow-armed troops. There may have been from 3,000 to 4,000 of this troop type involved in the battle. The most numerous single troop type would have been the militia, armed with shield, spear and javelin, capable of melee and skirmish combat. Supporting the militia were the skirmish archers. This troop type and the javelin-armed militia would have comprised the bulk of the army, perhaps up to 8,000 men in total. The Assyrians would have also possessed javelin-armed skirmishers, possibly numbering 2,000 to 4,000 if the DBMM army list is correct. On the Hittite side, Tutalia IV commanded the army. We have no idea of the size of the Hittite army, but based on guesswork and some numbers from an Assyrian letter, 28,000 to 30,000 men may be a reasonable maximum value. Due to the lack of references, we have no estimates of the number of chariots, but 4,000 to 5,000 may be reasonable. These possessed 3 crew and consisted of spearmen and javelin. The Hittite foot probably consisted of about 15,000 infantry. Let's now drill down into the troop types in more detail. The elite force in the Hittite army were the chariots, which were 3 crew chariots. The Hittite chariots were most likely permanent military formations and gave the Hittites a clear advantage against the 2 crew chariots of the Assyrians. Supporting the Hittites and their close allies were the vassal chariots, which were also 3 crew chariots, although their quality would have been lower. I lack an image of a Hittite mounted scout, but the Hittites would have had a small number of mounted scouts, mounted on horses, donkeys or asses, mainly used for scouting and also for sending of messages. The Hittite elite infantry were the standing army, which would have been armed with axes and long spears. These troops, at least according to the DBM army list, were highly effective, although the Assyrian elite troops were certainly their match. Supporting the regular infantry were the Hittite conscripts, which were not well trained or armed. It's unlikely many of these troop types were present in this battle, as this would have represented a militia that would have been formed to defend the homeland if invaded. A large part of the army would have consisted of Assyrian vassal spearmen and javelin, armed with a spear and shield. Supporting the vassal spearmen were the vassal archers, armed with a bow and fighting as skirmishers or in close order with the spearmen. During this period, most of the core troops, the close order troops, were a mix of spearmen and archers. The archers to soften up the enemy and the spearmen to actually go in to basically finish the battle when the enemy was disordered. This was a type of warfare that was possible because of lack of armour and heavy shields, etc. Later in history, it went out of fashion, but it would be a long time from now before it did go out of fashion. There would have also been a reasonable number of subject and allied skirmish troops armed with spears and fighting as skirmishers or with a shield and capable of melee combat. We have no real good information on the location of the battle and its flow. One guess is it was fought close to the modern Konulka. Perhaps the city of Nihriya was close to this location. The land is reasonably flat and wide, so would be suitable for chariots. To the north and south were rough terrain, but this flat valley was very wide, allowing for the free use of chariots. This possibly gave the Assyrian light chariots an advantage because they were faster and more numerous. We don't really know much about the battle, apart from the fact the Assyrians won. The information we have can be summarised as follows. The Assyrians claimed to have captured 28,000 Hittites, which, if accurate, would have made each army well in excess of 35,000 men. This is maybe unlikely, so probably represents the upper size limit of the Hittite army as well as the Assyrian army. As the Assyrians won, they would have possessed a similar, if not greater, number of troops. We do know the Hittite king survived the battle and managed to suppress a number of revolts in the Hittite kingdom. This tells me the Hittites lost the battle, but a sizable portion of the army did escape. The news of the defeat caused the revolts, and the Hittite kings spent years suppressing those revolts. We also know the war between the Assyrians and Hittites lasted for another 5 years, after which a peace treaty was signed. The Assyrians did not take all of the old Mitanni lands, but did take a sizable portion. I can assume while the Hittites were involved with suppressing their revolts, the Assyrians took city after city, but by the 4th or 5th year the Hittites returned and some form of stalemate would have occurred. Based on no real tangible evidence, but more on gut feel and really a gut feel based on the minimal information that we have. I have to assume the battle was very hard fought, with the Hittites being forced to withdraw. Apart from this guess, we have no idea of the flow of the battle, and I'm not going to make any guesses, as I simply lack anything to base those guesses on, apart from what I've already said. And so this completes episode 5 of my battle video series covering the Battle of Nihriya. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.